Santa Fe is the second or third largest art market in the country, depending on sales. So it's New York, Santa Fe, Los Angeles, or New York, Los Angeles, Santa Fe. The earliest artists in New Mexico were the Native Americans. You can find remnants of their artwork on pottery in museums depicting different images. Richard Martinez of San Ildefonso, Pueblo, seen here in 1935, was one of the first Native American artists to inspire generations of future artists. The Santa Fe Indian Market is the largest art market for Native Americans in the world. Maria Martinez, also of San Ildefonso, Pueblo, was a world-renowned potter. She is the one who made the black-on-black pottery world famous. The Santa Fe Indian School was founded in 1890. Along with the school, they had an art department that was run by Dorothy Dunn. Many of the early Native American artists attended her classes. Pablita Velarde, seen here in her class as a young girl, was from Santa Clara, Pueblo. She began her career using watercolors, but later in life, she transitioned from watercolor paintings to creating her own natural pigments. She sought these natural ingredients from the rich mineral and rock deposits in the surrounding mountains of her pueblo. Velarde's depictions of Pueblo life can be found at the Bandelier National Monument in northern New Mexico. Her work has been exhibited at the Smithsonian Institute and throughout the United States. Velarde has been honored in the U.S. and in France, where she received the Palms Academy's Award for Excellence in Art in 1954. Valino Shea Herrera of Zia Pueblo was born in 1902. His given name in Caris was Ma Pe Wee, which means redbird. He attended the Santa Fe Indian School and began painting at 15 years of age. In 1919, his work, along with other students, was featured at the Museum of New Mexico. By 1932, he had a successful art studio in Santa Fe and became an art teacher at the Albuquerque Indian School. In 1920, the self-taught artist gave the state of New Mexico permission to use his design of the Zia sun symbol as the state's logo. According to historical records, Herrera was excommunicated from the Pueblo for betraying his tribe by giving a sacred design to non-natives. In 1939, he was commissioned by the WPA, along with other Native American artists, to paint large murals depicting Pueblo life at the U.S. Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C. In this 1939 photo of Native American artists at the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C., you'll find many well-known artists from left to right: Alanhauser, Woodrow Crumbo, Valino Shea Herrera, and Gerald Nader. Alanhauser, the late sculptor and artist, is considered to be one of the most important Native American artists of the 20th century. His work is displayed in collections in the Southwest as well as in museums in the East that include the National Museum of American Art and the Museum of Indian Art in Washington, D.C. At the Japanese Royal Collection in Tokyo, his art is also featured. Hauser was a member of the Chiricahua Apache tribe in Oklahoma. He moved to Santa Fe in 1934. Hauser's father rode with Geronimo in 1868 prior to surrendering to the U.S. Army. Lloyd Kivanu was a Cherokee Indian from Oklahoma. He was the first Native American fashion designer. He also taught at Chicago's Art Institute and in Phoenix prior to opening a fashion boutique in Scottsdale. He believed that since many Native American students were natural-born artists, the way to reach them was through an abstract curriculum. He founded the Institute of American Indian Art in Santa Fe in 1962. The earliest Spanish colonial artists were the priests that came to Santa Fe and New Mexico in 1598. Much of their work depicts religious icons. Bernardo Miera y Pacheco was a cartographer and an artist and a sculptor. He's seen with his painting of Saint Raphael. And his reredo of Our Lady of Light, which was originally at La Castrense Military Chapel on the plaza, can now be seen at the Cristo Rey Church in Santa Fe. Fray Andres Garcia, an 18th century artist, painted St. Jerome, along with the artist Moyano of the early 19th century, who painted Christ carrying the cross, as well as St. Gertrude. Jose Cisneros was born in Mexico and lived most of his life in El Paso, Texas, but his artistic presence is felt in Santa Fe and beyond, where he is considered the premier artist in this country to have illustrated aspects of Spanish colonial history. His artwork is showcased at the Fray Angelico Chavez Library in Santa Fe and throughout New Mexico. With no formal instruction, the self-taught pen and ink illustrator has created thousands of illustrations that have appeared worldwide in books, magazines, and newspapers. Cisneros received more than 80 awards and citations for his artwork, with a National Humanities Medal awarded to him in 2002 being his most prestigious honor. Francisco Delgado was a prominent tinsmith at the turn of the 20th century. His work is on permanent display at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. His granddaughter, Angelina Delgado, followed in his footsteps. As a teenager, Delgado took part in the WPA, the largest government-sponsored work program during the Great Depression. In 2008, she was honored at the 75th anniversary of the National New Deal Preservation Association for her contributions to the program by President Roosevelt's granddaughter, Anna Eleanor Roosevelt, at the Roundhouse in Santa Fe. Eliseo and Paula Rodriguez were awarded a National Endowment for the Arts National Heritage Fellowship in 2004 for their lifelong career as artists. The couple, who were married in 1935, received this prestigious honor for their work in perfecting and preserving the art of straw applique, a technique that had all but died out during the early part of the 20th century. Often referred to as poor man's gilding, straw applique involves the layering of straw to emulate gold leaf. It was a popular art form in New Mexico throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. It can be found in churches throughout the state. Carlos Vierra came to Santa Fe in 1903. He was the first commercial artist to set up a studio on the Santa Fe Plaza. A prolific artist and photographer, he collaborated with the School of American Research in the restoration of the Palace of the Governors in 1909. That was the beginning of his role in advocating for Pueblo-style revival architecture that has become synonymous with Santa Fe's unique landscape. Edgar Lee Hewitt was an archaeologist-anthropologist who was the founder of the Museum of New Mexico. He also founded the School of American Archaeology, which today is called the School of Advanced Research, and in 1906, he petitioned the U.S. Congress to start the American Antiquities Act. The very first art colony in New Mexico was founded by Mabel Dodge Lujan in Taos. She invited many of the early artists to come to Taos, like Andrew Dashberg. But because there was a museum that was founded in Santa Fe in 1909, the art colony of Santa Fe quickly eclipsed that of Taos. Randall Davey, seen here in this photo with John Sloan, came to Santa Fe in 1913. Many of the early artists that came, including Carlos Vierra, suffered from tuberculosis. In this photo taken at Lavanda, Carlos Vierra, Dadis Myers, Sheldon Parsons, Theodore Van Solen, Gerald Cassidy, and Will Schuster are pictured. All of them had suffered from tuberculosis. Los Cinco Pintores, the 5 painters, were the first group of artists to have a major exhibit at the Museum of New Mexico. They included Joseph Bacos, Walter Merck, Willard Nash, Will Schuster, and Fremont Ellis. They introduced modernistic art in the Southwest at this first exhibit at the Museum of New Mexico. Alfred Meringue was part of the Transcendental Painters group that started in Santa Fe in 1938. It was started by the artist Raymond Johnson. This small group of budding artists strived to go beyond traditional art into a realm that was drawn from pure emotion, creating works that ranged from the abstract to the spiritual. Georgia O'Keeffe's love affair with New Mexico began in 1929, where she visited the state. By 1940, she had purchased property in Abiquiu at Ghost Ranch, a sprawling 21,000-acre ranch run by the Presbyterian Church. In 1946, after the death of her husband Alfred Stieglitz, who propelled her career as one of the most important female artists of the 20th century, moved permanently to her ranch in Abiquiu, where she spent the rest of her life. The artist's images of skulls and flowers have become an ubiquitous representation of the American Southwest. The Georgia O'Keeffe Museum in Santa Fe, which opened in 1997, is the most widely attended cultural institute in New Mexico. Her Abiquiu home and studio were designated national landmarks in 1998. O'Keeffe died in 1986. In accordance with her wishes, her body was cremated and her ashes were scattered at the top of Perdinal Mountain, located in the expansive New Mexico vista immortalized in her paintings that is often referred to as O'Keeffe Country. Olive Rush came to Santa Fe in 1920. She was the first female commercial artist in Santa Fe. In addition to being the first female artist in Santa Fe, she brought Quakerism to Santa Fe. Her home was the first Quaker house in Santa Fe. Eugenie Chouinard came to Santa Fe in 1927. Her work was featured at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, as well as the New York World's Fair in 1939. When Chouinard was 27, she became completely deaf and had to use her other senses of sight and touch, and that is how she became a sculptor. She was also great friends with the potter Maria Martinez, and she was the godmother to her firstborn child. Agnes Sims moved to Santa Fe to pursue her career as an artist in 1938. Her work had previously been exhibited at the Brooklyn Museum and at the U.S. Embassy in London. Other female artists in the early part of the 20th century included Jane Lippincott, Catherine Dudley, Alice Klauber, Grace Ravelin, Doris Rosenthal, Eva Springer, and Dorothy Britt, to name a few. The artist Tommy Macione came to Santa Fe after World War II. A barber by trade, he was known throughout town as El Diferente, the different one. In addition to being a painter and a barber, he got involved in politics. He ran for mayor of Santa Fe during several elections, and one year he even ran for U.S. president. He's seen here in this photo at the historical Santa Fe Fiesta Parade, where he depicted a Greek god. He died in 1992, and the park at the corner of Paseo de Peralta and Marcy is named in his honor. Today, his impressionistic art can be found at City Hall and in galleries throughout the country. Gunther Aaron came to Santa Fe in the 1970s after a successful career in Chicago as a commercial artist. When Gunther Aaron was a child, his sister and his parents were killed in the concentration camp in Nazi Germany in 1939. He began making abstract menorahs in memory of his sister that can be found in museums in Amsterdam, Berlin, New York, Chicago, and in Los Angeles. In New Mexico, his menorahs are displayed at Temple Beth Shalom and at the Capitol Art Collection at the State Roundhouse in Santa Fe. and at the Holocaust Museum in Albuquerque. Andrea drew Bachgalupa was an artist, sculptor, ceramist, and writer. He opened the first art gallery on Canyon Road in 1956. His religiously inspired work includes the bronze statue of St. Francis of Assisi in front of City Hall, a ceramic tile mural of the prophet Elijah at Mount Carmel at the Carmelite Chapel, and a tile mural of St. Francis at the Episcopal Church of Holy Faith, as well as etched glass panels at the Cathedral Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi. Ford Ruthling and his twin brother Carlton were born at St. Vincent Hospital in Santa Fe in 1934. He decided early on to be an artist and was a student of the artist Joseph Bacos of the Cinco Pintores, who taught art school at Santa Fe High in the 1950s. Ruthling's art has been showcased at the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., the Dallas Museum of Fine Art, the Museum of New Mexico, and in galleries throughout the world. In 1977, his paintings highlighting the pottery from New Mexico's Acoma, Hopi, Zia, and San Ildefonso Pueblos became a series of U.S. postage stamps. He was named a Santa Fe Living Treasure in 1993. These are just a few of the artists who have found inspiration in the landscape and light of Santa Fe, New Mexico.